Interesting. Thank you.
I'll see you later, Father.
I'll see you, Julio.
You're not staying?
He doesn't want me to.
I didn't say
it out loud.
I did. Anyway. Well, good evening, everybody. We'll get started here at 7 o'clock. So, the scripture we're using from is from Matthew chapter 5, verse 21 through 26. And it has something to do with what we're going to talk about tonight. So, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. You have heard that was said to your ancestors, you shall not kill, and whoever kills will be liable to judgment. But I say to you, whoever is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. And whoever says to his brother, Racha, will be answerable to the Sanhedrin. And whoever says, you fool, will be liable to fire Gehenna. Therefore, if you bring your gifts to the altar and there recall that your brother has anything against you, leave your gift there at the altar. Go first and be reconciled with your brother, and then come and offer your gift. Settle with your opponent quickly while on the way to court with him. Otherwise, your opponent will hand you over to the judge, and the judge will hand you over to the guard. They'll be thrown into prison. Amen, I say to you, you will not be released until you have paid the last penny. You have heard that was said to your ancestors, you shall not kill, and whoever kills will be liable to judgment. But I say to you, whoever is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment, and whoever says to his brother, Racha, will be answerable to the Sanhedrin, and whoever says, you fool, will be liable to fiery Gehenna. Therefore, if you bring your gift to the altar, and there recall that your brother has anything against you, leave your gift there at the altar. Go first and be reconciled with your brother, and then come and offer your gift. Settle with your opponent quickly while on the way to court with him. Otherwise, your opponent will hand you over to the judge, and the judge will hand you over to the guard, and you'll be thrown into prison. Amen, I say to you, you will not be released until you have paid the last penny. You have heard that it was said to your ancestors, you shall not kill, and whoever kills will be liable to judgment. But I say to you, whoever is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment, and whoever says to his brother, Racha, will be answerable to the Sanhedrin, and whoever says, you fool, will be liable to fiery Gehenna. Therefore, if you bring your gift to the altar, and there recall that your brother has anything against you, leave your gift there at the altar. Go first to be reconciled with your brother, and then come and offer your gift. Settle with your opponent quickly while on the way to court with him. Otherwise, your opponent will hand you over to the judge, and the judge will hand you over to the guard, and will be thrown into prison. Amen, I say to you, you will not be released until you have paid the last penny. All right, so this passage in Matthew is relatively early in the gospel, and it's actually around the start of Jesus' earthly mission. This is from the Sermon on the Mount. So Matthew 5, basically through 7, is Jesus giving this kind of long teaching about the moral life and how to live life in accord with God's will. And so here we see Jesus taking the fifth commandment, thou shalt not kill, which we're going to talk about tonight, and actually expanding upon that. And really what he's talking about is really about forgiveness, right? That usually when we forgive, there's kind of a death of soul that's involved with that. Or sorry, we don't forgive, right? And so in that regard, there's kind of levels to forgiveness. Maybe the lowest level of forgiveness is we want no harm to come to those that hurt us. Maybe we want good things for those that hurt us. Maybe we want the best things for those that hurt us. Maybe we can pray for those that hurt us. And of course, the highest form of forgiveness would be reconciliation. But we're not necessarily called to reconcile with everybody. As long as we're in this kind of gradation of these aspects, we are forgiving from our heart. The other aspect too is be free, right, of this burden that we can put on ourselves of revenge or hatred or even these kind of aspects of regret, right? So forgiveness is associated with the fifth commandment in that way, right? And that's why Jesus tells us to, kind of lay down our burdens of these things to bring about peace. Some things to get noticed. So there's a lot of language here that maybe for our 21st century ears may not make a lot of sense. Like for instance, racha. Does anyone know what racha means?
No, it sounds good with it.
Huh?
It sounds like it's rap music.
Okay, all right. Actually, it's Aramaic. It's actually the language of the Galileans, the language of Jesus himself. And what it means is like, you idiot, right? So when you say to your brother, you idiot, we will be answerable to Sanhedrin, right? You should go before the court because you should have that peace with your brother. And here, brother could just mean your natural brother, but also could mean your brother in humanity, right? The other thing is Gehenna. Does anyone know what Gehenna is? Or heard of Gehenna? It's ultimately associated with hell. It could also be some form of purgatory, but the actual place Gehenna was a place in the valley outside the walls of Jerusalem where they burn garbage, right? So it wasn't a great place to be. Right? One could maybe argue that, right? It was very barren. There was not any, water. It was a place where you basically got rid of the things you didn't want, right? So not a wonderful place to be. So good.
Well, I would say holding grudges would be something that would be up there with what we're talking about.
Mhm.
And by holding grudges, you don't get anywhere.
Right.
You lose.
Right.
There's no winning. And
It's enslavement,
it is.
right? It's
torture
enslavement.
yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's what Jesus is trying to get at here. And he often does that. He'll do that actually all through the Sermon on the Mount. He takes the commandments. He talks also about even like bearing false witness, like not to swear oaths. Don't do that at all. We talked about that when we talked about the second commandment, right? And so Jesus has a way of expounding because he is God, takes the divine law and expounds upon it. He has that authority. He can do that, right? John?
So up till this point, before the Sermon on the Mount, the rules that were stated, the heavy-duty rules, were more clear-cut. Don't kill somebody or you'll go to hell. And this is Jesus' introduction to the new covenant, the new deal. And when he was asked, like, what's the most important commandment? Well, love God and love your neighbor like yourself. And this is kind of, I'm going to say, you just being angry at your neighbor controls you. And I think the last part, to me, kind of guarantees that this will not put you in hell, but it will put you in purgatory for a very long time. So it's like you won't be released until you've paid the last penny, which means you will be released.
Sure.
But you're going to pay that last penny, or, not very.
Which is why many theologians posit he's really talking about purgatory here, and I mean that's necessarily hell. But I mean, there is an aspect of hell. You're kind of putting yourself in hell by doing these things too, right? Yeah. I think it's important to recognize. The other thing too is this kind of aspect of anger. So anger can be virtuous. For instance, when you think of Jesus in the temple, does anyone know the story I'm talking about?
Where he got upset with.
Yeah. So in other words, he came to the temple and he saw these money changers, these people that are taking foreign money, exchange them for shekels, which was the actual money of the Jewish people that could be used for temple worship, right? So the way this works is when you go to the temple, especially on these high feast days, you, by the law of Moses, have to offer a sacrifice. And you can't use foreign money because that's unclean. You have to use shekels. So they had these exchange tables in the temple to exchange these, unclean coins for the shekels. Now, it just so happened this was going on in the court of the Gentiles. So the old temple had multiple courts. There was like the court of the men, the court of the women, the court of the Gentiles, where those who maybe believed in God would go, but they're not part of the people of Israel. You had the court of the priests and the Levites. So it was kind of separating these different factions within the temple itself. And especially for high feast days, of course, the city would overflow. So leaders of the people decided to convert part of the temple and the court of the Gentiles to this money changing table. In other words, they were taking away the opportunity to worship for those who believed in God because they couldn't be there. And so he was angry. He was angry because they were turning his house, his father's house, into a den of thieves, right? They were not doing what was right by the law or by God. And so his anger wasn't directed towards destruction. It was actually directed towards love, correction, right? Notice that in that passage, he doesn't harm anybody. He does turn over tables. He does make a commotion. And perhaps that's the only way he could show those people what they were doing was wrong. And he was angry. But that's a righteous anger. That's an anger that's in line with good. For the love of somebody come from a place of love. That's not the same as revenge. And that's the anger that Jesus is talking about here. That vengeful anger. That's something we want to try to avoid. Because evil begets evil, right? Yeah.
Where is this passage from again?
This is Matthew chapter 5, verse 21 through 26. But all of chapter 5 is kind of similar in that regard. Tom?
I just thought it was interesting that settle with your opponent quickly while on the way to court with them. I've always thought of that as literal court, like on your way to the court. But then in the context of this, I just thought of it as perhaps court is the final judgment. So we should settle all of our problems with any opponents before our judgment.
Oh, that's true.
Or is that like a translation?
Yeah, I think it's, I'm there with you.
Aramaic judgment versus court, kind of.
Yeah, I mean, it could be both and. I mean, I think there's definitely,
God.
yeah, I think there's definitely a correlation there. I mean, there's a connection there. Also, elsewhere in Scripture, Jesus tells us how do we approach those that need correction, right? So, in other words, we have an obligation as Christians to correct our brothers. If they're doing something evil, we should tell them, hey, that's not good, right? And again, this is there's a moral thing and there's like maybe a matter of opinion, right? So in other words, man, I wouldn't paint my fence that way. I should go stop that person. Well, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about, well, I see this person doing something objectively wrong, right?
To hurt someone else.
Either that, or maybe they're like embezzling money, or maybe they're like doing some other things. Yeah, that's causing harm. I have an obligation as a Christian to not necessarily confront them, but correct them. Hey, do you know why you're doing that is wrong? Do you know what you're doing is wrong, right? And Jesus tells us very specifically that we should do these things, settle with our neighbor, and if they don't listen to us, we actually bring other witnesses with us, not necessarily to gang up, but to provide that witness that, hey, this person's doing everything they can to correct this person. And finally, if that person doesn't listen at all, Jesus tells us to get the church involved, right? Go to the higher authority. In the same way, this is kind of related to this aspect of murdering someone's character, murdering someone's conscience, murdering someone's spirit, in that we tend to do that the opposite way, right? If we see something wrong, our first initial thing is like go get the authority involved, right? But Jesus actually tells specifically, no, there's a way to approach this that's both charitable and just. And we should actually do everything we can in that regard to do those things. Your thoughts, comments, concerns, heresies? The fifth commandment. So if you got your handouts there, and I'll share this on the feed here. Okay. All right. Catechism, in case you're wondering. Okay, so we have to first off understand that all the teachings of the Ten Commandments, right? They were directed towards putting God before us, love of God, and also love of neighbor, love our neighbor as yourself. But also, the rest of these teachings, especially directed towards our neighbor, always has a consistent ethic being goods, and they should be upheld, right, in any way possible. So, what's good for one then in that regard is good for all in this case, right? So it's all good for all of us to live. Charity should be shared with everybody, right? That shouldn't be limited to anyone because of who we are as human beings, made in God's image and likeness, right? So maybe the way we see this more profoundly and more distinctly today when it comes to an aspect of that all human life is sacred from conception to natural death. Now, in our society, sometimes that actually is debated. But since the very first century, the writings of the 12 apostles themselves in the Didache, it talks about this aspect that the church affirms the moral evil of procuring things like abortion, which has been contrary to societies in which she upheld this, right? So from the very beginning, the church has always upheld that the willful taking of human life, especially life in the womb, is wrong. Now, there has been development of this over time. Like, for instance, if one were to read Augustine or Aquinas, there's been a debate on exactly when conception occurs, right? And even then, if conception brought about the presence of a soul. So, for instance, Augustine talks about the good of marriage. And in the good of marriage, he kind of has a tangential discussion about when conception occurs. Now, granted, this is like, the 4th century, before we have things like microscopes, before we have things like, x-rays, before we can actually see what happens in someone's body, that he was arguing that, it may take a couple weeks before the sperm reaches the ovum. They knew about those type of things, but they didn't actually see the internal action of how these things occur. And so in that regard, maybe there's a couple weeks where the sperm doesn't reach the ovum, in which case the soul isn't present, that conception hasn't occurred. Now, one could take that to extreme and say, okay, well, good. So in that case, it's okay to get an abortion within that time frame because, hey, it's not a person yet. It's not a soul. Aquinas even takes it a little bit further. He says, well, no, actually, we now know it's probably closer to like 3 days, right? What this goes to show is that these saints weren't trying to actually answer those questions about when the soul and when the body becomes ensouled. Because even Augustine and Aquinas would both argue to stop that process after the marital act would still be wrong regardless, because there's a potential there either way, right? Now we'll talk about more. We talk about the 6th commandment and sexual ethics and that kind of stuff. But in this regard, what they would still say is once conception happens, it's a human. And even science today backs that up. If you were to open up any biology book, you would say that they would say any being begins at the moment of conception, and human beings are no different, right? And so because human beings are rational beings, rational souls, their dignity is elevated that above animals, and they should even be more regarded as sacred in that regard, in that aspect, right? So a lot of this has been development over time of the teaching, but regardless, the teachers always taught, abortion, the willful taking of a human life, whether in the womb or at the end of someone's life, is wrong. That's always been the consistent ethic of the church. So a lot of times what we'll hear is like, well, isn't a woman in charge of her own body? And the answer to that is sure, right? That's very true. But once that new being comes about, that's no longer your body. That has separate DNA. It has its own body, has its own cells, has its own regeneration. There's a different thing there than your body, which is different than like your organ, right? Now there's been many dilemmas that have been kind of brought about in this discussion. Like, for instance, the most recent one was, let's say you have a violinist, right, who gets into a car accident, and let's say that violinist is hooked up to another person to like share, kidneys or whatever organs to bring about that person's life, right? So the argument is made, well, as a person, so that organ is used for that person, is it right to allow that sharing of that organ for this other individual to live, right? Can it be morally justified to say no? They would then maybe make that application to that of in the womb, right? That now there's 2 beings sharing an organ. Would it be okay then for one of those beings to say no to using that organ? I think the answer to that would be, well, what is the purpose of the organ, right? So the purpose of a kidney or a heart is to pump blood into a human being, right? The purpose of the womb and the reproductive system is to bring about new creation, right? So they're different in kind in the purpose of those things. And so there's many different arguments out there that we can maybe go into if you so want to, but ultimately we would still say that once life is there, it's a life, right? This also goes on the other side of the spectrum when it comes to someone at the end of their life. So if someone is, let's say, suffering severely, that they're maybe elderly, well, let's say they're not elderly. Let's say maybe they're 25, 26, bad accident, and they're in a great deal of pain.
Like on life support?
Maybe not. But regardless, we'll go good. Yeah. What are you saying, actually? Good.
I wouldn't know when to pull the plug. I would.
Well, that's kind of okay. So that's kind of what we're getting at here, right? So, would it be humane to terminate their life? Now, not necessarily pull the plug, but end the life.
No, that, I don't, so my opinion, I don't know if you, but you're ending somebody's life.
Mhm.
You're stepping in God's plan, whether it be 2 days or 3 days, and you don't want them to be in pain, that's very caring. But I just feel that's just stepping into God's plan. Do whatever you can to aid that.
Sure.
Even if they're in a coma for months or years.
Well, I mean,
Right.
there's also the thing of like, oh, pain and so forth, so that's the thing of like, when that discussion's even being had, there's, for status, it's like, oh, there's no brain function, and there's no
Right.
this, and these other variables.
Right.
Well, it's like, okay, well, what's the scenario over there?
Yeah.
But then you have the other side, which is like Canada, where they're like, oh, sign up.
Yeah, you feel bad, we'll kill you.
You got, you
Yeah,
get
right.
headaches every Wednesday, no problem.
Right, right.
No,
Yeah.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
no-
Yeah.
Canada's
We'll
past
put
that.
you in a box
Yeah.
and call it a day.
But wait, we're saying something.
I mean, that's actually going on right now in Canada.
Serious.
Yeah.
They literally.
I know you were joking. I'm so
No.
sorry.
No, actually, so
A 24-year-old
it's called
was
MAID.
Just helped assisted suicide in Canada, 24 years old. And the complaint was I get migraines.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
They also did an infant.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean,
Pretty sure.
so in that regard, people talk about quality of life, right? And so that may be a factor, but that shouldn't be the only factor in these determinations. So in general, the church is always upheld when it comes to maybe someone who's in these states of life, whether it be in a coma, whether it be like someone at the end of, even older. You have ordinary means of care and extraordinary means of care, right? So ordinary means generally is things like food, hydration, air. That's pretty much it. Those are like the basics that we need to actually live and survive. And then we have an obligation to provide those things. Now, there can be maybe a circumstance where those ordinary means become extraordinary. So for instance, let's say I have a food tube, right, that has to be inserted, and because of infection, they have to keep on taking out. It becomes infected. It becomes, unbearable. At that point, you could make the argument that the ordinary is now extraordinary because it's causing now more harm than good, right? In which case, not to kill the person, but maybe that treatment could be stopped.
Hospice.
Yeah, hospice. Maybe I can do things intravenously now, right? So there could be other treatments, but that treatment wouldn't necessarily be required anymore because of the damage and the harm it's doing. Other factors, things like, okay, well, hey, I have kidney failure, but I'm 96 years old. Would it be wrong for me to not do dialysis?
Yes,
Okay, why?
because I feel like you want to do everything you can to survive and keep yourself alive. And if you give up, then you're going to die.
Well,
And
maybe.
utilize all of everything that we
Right.
have.
Okay.
and
So the answer to that is you're absolutely right, Ashley. But also the question would be, well, we can't live forever, nor should we want to, right? In other words, to try to do everything you possibly can to extend your life unreasonably.
Well, my mom had to have a feeding tube.
Yeah, well, I'm not talking about something different now.
She was pretty much dead,
Yeah.
and she was
I'm- I'm talking now about like another treatment that could, again, the question is
it was
it causing more harm than good? So in other words,
We did
there's a
everything
point in
that.
someone's care where even things like taking like doing the hydrolysis, the body may reject that.
The body
Right.
stops responding.
And so in that regard, I'm not really doing anything here. It's really more of a problem now for me than it is a help. And so that's why it would depend.
It was.
Yeah.
Intrusive.
Yeah.
To her.
I guess part of it kind of goes in like just the natural way of life before modern medicine. Of the thing of like, look, we're gonna do everything we can. Here's all these things that we do know that help this thing. But at one point, like, we're gonna give you food and water, and we're gonna make you as comfortable as possible, and life has a natural process. And
Right.
we're all
Yeah.
going to go there eventually and have this happen, which the ideal thing is like, hopefully, you're ready for it. And,
Right.
you know, and looking forward.
Which again, we have a whole sacrament dedicated to this, right? That's called anointing of the sick, right? I mean, so in other words, we as Catholics and Christians don't fear suffering. We understand that suffering is part of life, and that suffering is actually a way for us to grow closer to Jesus on the cross. And in that regard, we become models of what it means to suffer with dignity. That doesn't mean we have to suffer needlessly, nor should we. But in general, we should provide those basic needs to someone, especially in the circumstance they find themselves, unless it becomes problematic or the benefit outweighs the detriment, or the detriment outweighs the benefit, right? So this isn't exact science. Like here's where the line is, here's where it is. It is circumstantial, and a lot of times, actually, this has been developed over time too. Like as you're saying, Marty, you know. It used to be like in the 16th century, if someone had to have their leg cut off, they would have been like, you know what, it's okay to remove treatment in this regard because, well, you know, you have to need your leg to farm, and your farm is how you provide for your family, and it might be, you know, very, very painful. You might go into shock and die anyway, right? So we may not just may not do treatment to you and let you pass naturally, right? Now, of course, as science has developed, that's changed. I mean, nowadays, you have to have your leg amputated, even if it's a big deal.
It's not a mortal
It's not one thing that we should say we remove treatment for, right? Because we have means of care that actually can be helpful and beneficial. So I just want to say that because we do understand that it's conception of natural death. And even though there's a limitation to that, we shouldn't just kind of keep on trying to extending life because that's also impossible. Eventually, there will be a point where we all pass. That's part of life. And we should not fear that. We also shouldn't necessarily, escalate or, expedite that either, right? Where we see this probably most profoundly is for those who maybe are in hospice. Sometimes there's an aspect in hospice care where someone, especially in pain, the morphine is increased. Now, that is something to pay attention to because it's not that the morphine can't be increased. It's that sometimes the morphine is increased to the point where they know the person's going to die. And that would be like euthanasia. And that's a problem, right? So we want to be mindful of these things and recognize the moral aspects of this.
So when you talk about treatment, whether or not to have treatment, you can't just, from what I'm understanding, you can't just say yes or no. You have to look at all the circumstances.
Correct. Yeah.
So if a person had a reoccurrence of cancer and
Mhm.
said, I'm not going to do any more treatment,
Right.
you would have to look at what modern medicine can now do.
That,
even
or-
though there would be suffering,
it
is
is-
there a chance?
Yeah. Is there other things like comorbidity? What's the age of the person? Would the treatment actually be beneficial to the person? Right. Even also things like finance. So let's say we're in a circumstance where there's this new method of treatment that can work, can't work, we don't really know for sure, but it's going to bankrupt your family. Should we do it?
Yes.
So for the person too,
Why not?
Well,
it's going to bankrupt you.
is it good to leave your family destitute because extend your life and let's say you're, I don't know, 90, 110 years old?
There's all
I
those
think you
variables
should do
of
everything you can.
I mean, in that regard, you could say, well, maybe if I'm like, maybe I'm 40, if I'm my age, maybe, right? because, well, hey, I mean, I can maybe make more money to provide my family by having this treatment. I'm just saying that it's not necessarily black and white and cut and dry. All the factors need to be put together and taken into consideration to make those determinations.
Every case is different.
That's right.
It's not a thing of like, oh, well, this is expensive, so bye.
Right.
It's a
Yes.
thing of like, hey, we've done like 15 treatments.
Right.
We've done all the things there are. I'm 70 something years old.
Yeah.
And rather than going to this thing that may have all these severe repercussions, and maybe I'm just gonna go naturally with dignity.
Yeah.
70 is still young though.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes,
But let's say also too. Let's take it a step further. Let's say, okay, not only am I going to be maybe possibly my family destitute, there's only maybe a 20% chance that it actually does what it's supposed to do, and not only that, but also there's going to be these other side effects from it that are going to maybe leave me decrepit or whatever,
I don't
right?
think we can get in that nitty-gritty.
Well, I mean, but what I'm saying is those are the nitty-gritties you have to look at,
Yeah.
because it's not just like we should do everything we can within reason,
Within-
right? Because reason would dictate what's actually allowed and what's not. Okay.
I have someone in my family going through this very same situation. And coming Tuesday will be 30 days, and some of us think that's when the hospital will finally listen to the family and honor all the requests.
Yeah, I think there's many families go through this these days, and it's not. Again, it needs to be taken into consideration. I personally have, counseled many families in priesthood about these things, and ultimately, you have to be able to sleep at night, right?
That's why I say do everything you can.
Within reason.
And then you can say goodnight.
Right.
So I had a nephew who was in a vegetative state for over 10 years.
Wow.
Mhm.
That's a very long
And
time.
it is a very long time, and his family had to take him out of the institution because they weren't caring for him, because they couldn't. He needed 24 hours somebody right there. He had a trach, he had a feeding tube, they had to change him, they had to turn him. When he started choking, they had to suck him, somebody had to be there 24/7. And
Wow.
he kept getting infections, lung
Still almost like a
infections.
little baby.
He was, only he was 6'4".
Wow.
Yeah, so, his
So
parents,
10 years.
10 years, his parents kept getting these infections. Yeah, they could fight him with antibiotics, but what were they doing? His body just.
We see a difference kind of between a intentional action taking someone's life and maybe a removal of treatment that can maybe prolong someone's life but have detrimental effect, right? So a lot of this comes down to the fact of, okay, well, what's grave matter here, whether you directly or indirectly participate in it. And so that also affects the culpability of the action. So there's a difference between a formal cooperation with evil versus material cooperation. So if we take, let's say, the example of an abortion, right? If I'm an abortion doctor, maybe I'm a nurse that assists in abortions, that's all I do, right? That's more an intentional action that I'm formally participating in that act, right? So the culpability is much more severe than, let's say, I'm a worker in the hospital that puts kits together for surgeries. And maybe those kits are used for abortions, but they're also used to do things like heart surgery and other things that can be beneficial. In that regard, I may be materially, I have some contribution indirectly to the action itself. I'm not willing it. I have no say in where these things go. That's not up to me. But then I also participated in kind of more a remote way, right? And so both should be avoided. We should avoid formal cooperation and material cooperation. But the question is, how much do we know? How much can we control? So let's take this worker in the hospital. What should he do? Okay, I know now that these kits I'm making are being used in abortions. Not all, mostly not.
They could be used.
Could be, but I know for sure they are. I don't know which ones. I don't have any control of which ones, but I know they are. What should I do? Maybe, let's say though the market is really, really saturated right now, and I have 5 kids at home and a wife or husband, and I really can't lose this job.
Oh, I didn't say quit your job, I would say.
I don't think you
start
should
to
work
seek
there
to
if you
find
don't
other
believe in it.
Okay, I mean that's an option. Maybe go
And
find
if
something
you're
else to
killing
do.
Children, killing people, then
Sure.
why are you putting yourself in that situation? Just don't be there.
Okay, let's take it a step further. I had someone come up to me in my former parish and say, "So can I not use shampoo?" I didn't know what this person was talking about. Like, I don't know what you're talking. What are you saying? What this person was asking, because some shampoos use infant stem cells from aborted babies to actually make the product.
I hope Herbal Essence isn't one of them.
Well, see, that's the point, right? Now, I don't know which ones do, which ones
I mean,
don't.
do they have to put that on the
Never.
bottle?
I've never heard that. Yeah.
Children's little
What? Where
cells,
did they,
that's
why
weird.
did they think that would be a good ingredient? Like,
Well,
what the
stem-
scientist was going,
stem
"No,
cell-
we
well, I
need to
mean,
add here."
So the purpose,
Guys, wait.
the thing about stem cells. So here's the argument, right? Well, hey, these babies have already been aborted, right? We can't do anything about that now. We might as well use them for a good purpose. But by using that shampoo, am I contributing to that evil in some way?
Yes.
Okay, but how do I know which shampoo use and which ones I
At
don't?
least they die for something.
Okay, but to make my hair pretty? Is that
Well,
really
I
a good
mean, At
reason?
least they're, they're
And do we know that for a fact? 'Cause
Uh-huh.
I've never heard
There are
of
some shampoo, yes.
it. I
Yeah.
have never.
If you look up on the internet, you'll find there's certain
Okay.
shampoos that do. Now, they don't necessarily have to tell you, right?
They have to
So, I
list the
mean,
ingredients.
Not necessarily. Because they also could use it maybe for testing,
Yes.
in which regard, too, they don't necessarily have to tell you that either. But still would be contributing materially maybe to that. Again, proximate, but does that mean I should never wash my hair again? What I'm trying to get at is we may participate in materially in evil all the time and not even know it, right? So it's not, again, cut and dry. The more we understand, the more we know, the more our conscience will tell us whether we should or shouldn't.
Would that be considered like manipulative material cooperation? Because you're.
I would say it's probably a remote material cooperation, right? Because we're far away from the action. It's not like I'm willing this. It's not like I know for sure even
Oh,
what's being done here, right? Now, maybe if I'm the person that actually is doing the testing, well, maybe you're still materially cooperating, but you're more proximate to the action now, right? And so maybe I should what can I do in that regard? Well, maybe I should find some other way. Right. So that's all to say, it's not, you may not even know.
I know that poop is used for mascara,
Great.
or is it horse?
Bad.
The boobs, that's
It's
the
bats.
horses.
Yeah.
It's bats.
Yeah.
Is
I
it bats?
don't know.
Okay. Batty eyes, yeah.
I mean, there was even things like, again, a few years ago, there was this whole aspect of blood diamonds, right?
Yes.
I mean, diamonds that were mined on the backs of slave labor. And if you wouldn't necessarily know. I got this ring for my girlfriend. Oh, that's awesome. Where'd it come from? Somewhere in Africa. I don't know. Right? So there's maybe a line between, they say ignorance is bliss. In some ways that's true,
I agree.
but it's better for us to know than not know. Because the other aspect of this too is that maybe we should also do things to overcome it. So maybe instead of using shampoo, I make my own shampoo now. I don't know. I do the dry shampoo thing now.
Yeah, but what's even in that?
Right.
And how does it even?
How's that come about? I know. The rabbit hole can get pretty deep and pretty crazy pretty easily.
So what did you tell the person who came to you and asked?
I said, I have no idea what you're talking about. And so I said, I'll have to look into that. And I told the person, well, after research, I'm like, well, the fact you don't know for sure, you wouldn't be culpable. and that's the truth. Okay, I get PERT. Do they use? I don't know. They don't say, right? So I'm assuming no. Maybe I assume charitably they don't. Okay, fine, right? But if I do find that out, and I find out they do, what do I do now?
Switch your food.
Maybe, right?
Right, the company.
Right.
I know Head and Shoulders doesn't have
Good.
it.
Head and Shoulders, no, that's
Yeah,
way old,
yeah,
right?
certainly.
They weren't killing babies.
So let's talk about another aspect of this when we talk about legitimate defense, right? So that is actually a right and a grave duty. That's different from taking a life, right? So there's different action between actually actively taking a life and defending it, right? Even it's an aspect of, let's say, great fear, or I have an obligation to defend life of myself and those, right? We use the example, we talk about like things like martyrs. Like if a gunman came in here right now, I would be morally justified in dunking under the table trying to save my own life, as all of you would, right? That's perfectly fine. There's no wrong in that. It would also be okay and even heroic virtue for you to jump in front of the gunman and try to overcome that gunman, even using proportional force to do so. So if I had a weapon on me, I would be totally justified in pulling out that weapon and even shooting that person to save the lives of everyone here and my own life. That's not taking life. I don't want to, but I am defending life. And in many ways, that might be the difference. So if we're going to talk in a minute about just war, but military service, police, those are kind of aspects that we want to think about. So let's say it's the middle of the night, you're in bed, and you hear glass breaking downstairs in your living room. And you grab, let's say, a baseball bat, and you go downstairs, and you hear a noise, and you just start swinging, and you inadvertently hit somebody and kill them.
That's a lucky shot in the dark.
Yeah.
Maybe. Is that justified? Is that murder?
You're gonna go to.
Yeah, that's murder.
Are you?
No.
No way, are you kidding
I mean,
me?
you might not-
You're intruding.
You're defending.
I'm defending my life.
What if it was like your son or something? And you didn't-
Well, okay, good. Good. No, let's take it a step further, right? Okay. Well, I don't have a son, but
Right.
if I did, and I didn't know any better, I'm assuming he's in bed. So what else could it be, right? I'm not, again, trying to hurt anybody, but because of the circumstances, I might have to defend my life, which means I have to take someone else's maybe.
So,
William,
I think a 10 has a lot of like
in
motive or.
in this case, it does, because in one aspect, I'm like, I don't want to use this if I don't have to.
Yeah, you're not like
Right.
aiming for his head. You
Exactly.
don't know where he is.
That's much different than I hear glass breaking downstairs. Oh boy, where's my gun? Right? That is a little bit different.
My gun.
so,
That's a lot different.
So how does that pertain to like concealed carry? Like
Yeah.
I conceal carry regularly.
Similarly,
Because of the place we live in, and it's not to be aggressive.
Right.
I'm never aggressive with it, but it's more so a defensive standard of like, I'm gonna protect myself and everyone around
of course,
me in a situation.
that's exactly right. In other words, I don't want to use it.
Yeah. No.
I have no intention of using it. I want to deter, and I want to make sure that people are safe and even defend my life. That's different than, man, I really hope I get to use this today.
Even in
Right.
even in a situation of like using that in a defense situation against somebody.
Yeah.
You don't, even if you have to, you don't want to, just because of the simple legal
Right.
ramifications that follow suit with it.
Exactly.
Even if you're justified, it doesn't.
I mean, even a police officer, it's the same thing would apply for them.
You have to
Right.
arm yourself.
I have to defend. My purpose as a police officer is to defend life, is to protect. That's much different than actually willfully and wantingly wanting to take a life. Those are different actions completely, right? And more specifically when someone's in the military, right? So we want to preface this by saying that any war is a failure of human reason and charity, and should be avoided at all costs. However, because of the fallen world we're in, sometimes that's necessary. And St. Augustine in the 4th century developed this thing called just war theory. And there's two aspects of that: leading up to war and in war itself. So, for instance, leading up to war, it has to be done by legitimate authority, right? So, if let's say there has to be a clear defender and a clear aggressor. So, in other words, let's say, I don't know, France decides they want to come invade the United States because of our huge resources, right? Well, John can go and negotiate that because John doesn't have any authority to do that, right? That has to be a designated authority to actually talk about that. And we have to be the defender, not the aggressor here, okay? All outlets of peace must be exhausted. Every negotiation has to be done. Everything would have to fail. This is a last resort. Everything else has been tried and has failed at this point. And again, there must be a clear defender, and we must not be the aggressor. Now that's interesting, because could there be something done preemptively? Or maybe deterrence made? Yes. But again, it has to be as the defender, not the aggressor. In other words, I'm doing these things not to occupy that or to gain it. I'm defending what we already have. Tom?
For something like the First Crusade,
Yeah.
where land was taken,
Mm-hmm.
and then the crusade was to come back and take it back.
Well,
Yeah, in simple terms, whether that was actually.
yeah, right, okay, yeah.
But even if it was some amount of time in the future, would that be justified as the defender, even though it was however long ago that the land was taken?
So I think if we're talking about leading up to war or antebellum, right? That's the Latin term, before the war. Yes. Now here's maybe where the sticking point usually is, because there also has to be these followed within war, and might be where and even argumentation about have we actually ever had a just war? Because in that regard, there are certain aspects of this too. Non-participants to be allowed, meaning we should not target non-combatants, right? There should be civilian protection. There can be those who actually don't want to participate, and they're allowed not to do so, right? Proportionalism, meaning I have to defend myself proportional to the attack I'm receiving. So we go back to, like, let's say the house breaking in aspect, right? If someone comes into my house with a gun, it'd be disproportional for me to pull out a bazooka. Right. But again, American use it as in action, because that would be disproportional.
So are you saying if that's the only thing you have,
As a turn, I should use it.
you wouldn't?
But is there a way for me to be more
Give a
particular,
small
precise?
knife or something,
Maybe
but
again,
at the same
well, again,
time,
proportionality.
gun too.
Proportionality, right? That's what's saying, right? Is I shouldn't, if I have, let's say, a gun, they have a gun, that's proportionality.
I'd be using the
If they have a gun, I have a bazooka, well, that may be a little disproportionate. Maybe a better scenario would be if they have a pistol, I have a semi-automatic assault rifle. Okay, that might be a little more proportional. I may have the advantage, but again, I don't want to use it. I'm defending my life and I have an advantage. That should act as a deterrent before I actually use it, right?
Hey, what kind of weapon do you have? Because I've got a bazooka.
Oh, no. So again, the intention is key here too, right? So if all I have is a bazooka, well, if I use a bazooka in my house, I'm going to blow up my house probably.
And yourself.
And myself maybe, right? So I need to be thoughtful in this, but have the intention of defending, not destroying. Okay? So that's why, oh yeah, sorry, Cassie.
If we're talking about like defending your house.
Yeah.
Like if you see somebody walking down the street and you like pull out your gun to like.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
Like shoot.
Yeah, like if somebody's
I mean, that's so I mean, with law, like Missouri firearm law, the whole thing here. So if somebody is breaking in my home with a weapon, I'm justified in defending my home. No questions asked.
Morally and legally.
Okay, so here's the thing.
Gotta have the moral.
If I hear someone trying to kick in my door and I'm in the home, if I fire a round through the door, I'm going to prison.
Right.
You say, I have a gun
So-
and I will.
Yeah.
So I mean, in any situation, the idea is to de-escalate the situation, and that's it. I mean, generally, a lot of times for like a home defense stuff, I guess it depends on the scenario and the training. Like I practice a lot, and I actively train a lot in a lot of different scenarios. But like, and like a firearm I keep in my nightstand that's next to me for that situation, I always put a blank in that first round, because the first thing I'm gonna go when I'm on a bed in the scenario is I'll pop a blank off. 99% of the time, they're going to leave.
Yeah.
Because they know what they have no clue what I have.
Right, right.
And that's the whole scenario of, do I have a bazooka or what
Right.
else? Am I a Navy SEAL? Am I this scenario? It's going to be bad anyway, but like someone outside of your home, they can leave.
Yeah.
There's no,
Yeah.
so like if you go after them, you're going to jail because you're the aggressor, not the
Yeah.
defendant.
So, and this maybe when we talk about like war, that's what we're talking about here, right? Is that the even the defending entity needs to actually uphold that civilian protection. Meaning, if I go into a town and I kick all them out of their homes and I treat them poorly and undignified, that's a violation of the just war theory, which would automatically make the entire war unjust.
I think you could say like every war has been unjust, but there's been just battles.
Yeah, I mean, so you can say there's maybe just intention or just reasoning, but it's really hard to argue that there's been any war that has been waged that actually has been completely just. And so when we get down to things like, let's say now in our current age, nuclear, is there any scenario in war where a nuclear weapon can be used? Based on what we talk about here. No. It can be used as a deterrent, and that's hopefully all we use it for these days.
So a threat.
Yeah. Hey, I got the nuclear weapon, just so you know. Right? If you try to attack me, I got a nuclear weapon.
It's a shame that you're just bluffing every time.
Well, if it's a Christian nation, I mean, you probably assume that, right? So that's kind of the problem with it. It's like we have them, but also, we shouldn't use them, right? And because they're indiscriminate, right? I cannot guarantee safety of the civilians or non-participants being affected by this by dropping a nuclear weapon somewhere. As a matter of fact, the first time, do you guys know that the first time the nuclear weapon was used was actually against a Catholic town? Nagasaki was actually a Catholic town. Japanese Catholics were killed
Lots of
in the first dropping of the bomb,
anniversaries.
which is tomorrow.
Was Nagasaki or Hiroshima the one with the church was the only building standing?
Nagasaki.
Nagasaki.
So questions about anything we've talked about so far? Because these are kind of the big things.
Yeah.
Now we're going to kind of go more of the minutia, but still important to recognize. Okay.
I do
Yeah.
actually
Yeah,
have a
sure.
question. Well, never mind.
No, go ahead.
It's a dumb question.
There's no such thing as a dumb question. Just dumb answers.
Well, it goes back to abortion.
Yeah.
I feel like if I was ever raped, I would be having the baby.
Yeah.
Because
So
it would
right.
be-
No, that's good. That's good. I was going to talk about this kind of tomorrow, or for our next session, but that's good. Let's talk about that. Does one immoral act justify another?
The end never justifies the means.
Right.
I
So regardless of how the child is conceived, they'd still be a child. We would still say that rape shouldn't happen. It's horrible. That women should be protected and justice should be served. Right? That rapist shouldn't be free. Obviously, we should do everything we can to incarcerate that person and stop them from doing even more damage. But the living being within that woman is still a human being,
it's still.
and it's not that child's fault that they were conceived the way they were.
Yes,
Right?
And you never know what that child will go on to do.
I
Correct.
agree.
Yeah.
It's just a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
The baby's.
Tom?
And coming from a priest who is also a bioethicist, there is justification to go to a hospital and request a non-abortifacient contraceptive
Mhm.
In the case of rape.
Mhm.
So there's cases where like convents are in areas that are not accepting of Catholics, and the nuns were raped. The nuns had on hand contraceptives that were not abortifacient.
Yeah, we'll talk about that more tomorrow. That's a whole can of worms. Probably get into a little deeper. But I mean, in this regard, though, when it comes to the conception of the child, there are other alternatives also to the. I mean, you could always give a child for adoption.
I would never be able to do that.
and-
I just-
And I will say, I'll just tell this right now, kind of
But
the
I'm
a
not in that
preview.
position, so I'm saying that now.
One of the 3 jobs I have is actually on the Respect Life Apostolate, and I work with Abortion Healing Ministry. And I've heard many, many stories from post-abortive women of how their children were conceived, the choice they made. It's a beautiful ministry. It's also incredibly heartbreaking. Because what you learn is that these women that make these choices are not doing it on their own. And the amount of damage it does to the woman, not just physically, but emotionally and psychologically, it's devastating.
So Project Rachel.
Project Racial, but also the Archdiocese has their own abortion healing ministry too.
Are we
so-
allowed to go with you to those places? Like,
No,
I can't.
not unless
I
you're
have to be-
post-abortive.
like-
The reason being
like
is 'cause they're-
Patriot and
they're-
stuff like
they're-
that,
Well, for privacy.
Yeah, it's more confidentiality,
or,
right? So like, I don't even say where these things happen.
Yeah.
Because they're supposed to be confidential. Right. I mean, you can get involved with the ministry if you so desire. That doesn't necessarily mean you'll be working directly, but yeah. So
It's hard.
it is.
It's very hard.
It is.
I probably think.
Yeah.
I couldn't,
Well-
I don't know. But I just saw a man over there, in a horrible state of mind. Just seeing him, he looked like he was miserable on the bench out, just right across the street from here.
Hmm.
Right before I pulled in, and it was weighing on me now that I'm with all of you, but at the same time, it's like, oh my gosh. I want to help him some help. But I don't know. Anyway,
Well, I take it back. We actually have one more topic to discuss. It's kind of severe.
It is.
We are stewards, not owners of the life God has entrusted to us. So it's not ours to dispose of. So this goes to with other people, but also to ourselves. So when we talk about things like suicide, that's seriously contrary to justice, hope, and charity. And again, this has been kind of developed over time. The teaching of the church is not necessarily that those that commit suicide are committing mortal sin. Because remember, to commit a mortal sin has to be full deliberation of the intellect and will. And to take your own life, there has to be something lacking in your deliberation that would not actually elevate it to that culpability, in which case we always trust in God's mercy and love in these regards. But suicide is taking of one's life, right? And so in that regard, it's still grave matter, but perhaps not a mortal sin, depending on the circumstance of the person. So regardless, heaven will be open to them too. As a matter of fact, Padre Pio, there was a woman that approached him and said, my son committed suicide. What should I do? And he said, well, pray for him. Because, in God's time, he doesn't look at the past, present, future all the same. And our prayers can have an effect on that person, even in the past, right? That we trust in God's mercy and love, right? We've heard this term or this phrase, there are no atheists in foxholes. And so what that means is when we're faced with our own mortality, even if it's suicide, as long as we're open to that mercy and forgiveness from God, God will provide. That's the nature of these sacraments by desire. Judas, for instance, maybe a great example of suicide in the Bible. We don't know where he ended up. He's a rather interesting figure. We hope he's in heaven because he too was open to he too was eligible for God's mercy and love, right? If he wanted to receive it. And that's kind of the hard part because we can't look in someone's souls and know them, what they're going through, know their character, but Jesus can, right? So we trust him to be a loving, merciful judge. Sorry, Marty, you were saying something.
No, I'm just saying, I was like, I'm sure he spent a little time in purgatory.
Maybe. I mean, who knows, right? You know, actually, in the Eastern Church, he's actually venerated as a saint. So that's interesting.
I think there's many people who are not of sound mind
Mm-hmm.
when they
Yeah.
take their own
Which, again, that would
lives.
not be full deliberation of the mind, right?
I only pray and hope that none of you ever go through that.
Yeah.
Because I am.
So then,
Until the day I die, when I get there and I meet him, I'm gonna ask him why.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's the same thing too, like unintentional suicides happen a lot.
Yeah.
But he was ill. We just know.
To that point, when I was in high school, there was a young man who was trying to play a prank on his father. They apparently had this prank war they would do with each other. And one day he decided to get up, onto a beam in his basement, and he had like a hook. He was going to hang himself from it. Well, the hook slipped and he ended up killing himself.
Actually doing it.
Yeah.
Kind of same thing, like, I mean, then you have the case of like overdoses.
Yeah.
And other variables.
Yeah.
I mean, generally an overdose is considered, they're like, overdose, but a lot of times it's considered.
Yeah. Yeah, and we'll talk about that here in a second too. When we talk about things like addiction, those aspects of like maybe a slow death, right? We're told in the Beatitudes, again, on the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus starts that with the Beatitudes, the 8 Beatitudes. Blessed are the peacemakers. So maybe some things we never really thought of as killing, but is a form of a violation of the 5th commandment. Pride. Do I think myself better than the people around me for whatever reason, right? Pride in many ways is a capital sin. It's putting ourselves in the place of God, right? I'm better than this person because of whatever, right? That could be a form of killing someone's character or their good name. Anger, we kind of talked about that. What's the difference? Malicious compared to righteous, right? So anger can be a form of murder if it's vengeful, if it's malicious, if it's eye for an eye, right? Stubbornness, maybe death of the conscience or the intellect. Am I killing my brain by not being open to what God wants for me? Overindulgence, excessive food, gluttony. These may not be a quick death, but might not taking care of our health, and I'm obviously guilty of this too.
Technology as well.
Maybe that too, right? These are aspects of maybe kind of slowly killing ourselves, and especially maybe we can slip into things like addiction, which maybe reduce the culpability. Usually, addiction, there's not, again, this aspect of deliberation and even maybe compulsion because of the illness, but the things we do can maybe lead into that. So things like drugs, alcohol, mutilation. Do I maybe, I don't know, cut myself? Do I, do other forms of things to my body that are harmful to it? Right? Hate. That's an offense against charity. That also causes death of charity within us. Right? So there's a difference in kind between liking somebody and hating somebody, or not liking somebody and hating somebody, right? We're called to love everybody. Doesn't mean we necessarily have to like everybody. It doesn't mean necessarily we have to have a relationship with everybody. We're still called to recognize the dignity of the person and give them charity when it's needed. So maybe what does that look like? Well, sometimes we see people at the end of the on-ramps and off-ramps on the freeway. Ugh. That's a little difficult, right? Because prudence may dictate to us what we should do in these circumstances. So maybe I don't necessarily give them money, but one thing I've done since I've become a priest is I bless them, I pray for them. Also, I carry these around. Gift cards. So these in particular, you can only buy 3 things with it from Chick-fil-A.
Wow.
So I like that because they can't necessarily exchange them for money usually, or they don't get much for it anyway. and they're limited in what they can actually get with it. I don't think you're going to get many drugs or alcohol with this, right? So there's ways we can rationally approach these things in charity.
I didn't even know
Provide.
they did that.
Yeah,
Did Chick-fil-A make them specifically for that?
I don't know.
Because they are like specifically religious.
They are, yeah.
They are.
Yeah.
Because
That's a good question.
when I worked downtown, this company I worked for, once a year, they had the police come in and talk to us. The very first thing they told me, do not give any of the homeless people money. Because most of it's going to alcohol and drugs.
Yeah.
If they say they're hungry and want a sandwich, take them. Well, we'll
Yeah.
take you to the McDonald's right here or
Right.
whatever. We'll take you to
Yeah.
buy
Yeah.
whatever you want. They'll refuse you 9 out of 10.
So, some people bring put in their cars like granola bars, maybe water,
Well,
cool,
yeah,
you know.
cooler.
Yeah,
ice
sure.
water,
Yeah. As a matter of fact,
Same deal.
at my former parish, we had our youth group used to make like care packages, and they would like give them out like with like first aid stuff and like a little bit of food and something. Yeah. So yeah, but you're right. I mean, usually if someone denies it, it's like, well, do you really need it? But to be open to those things. The other way this works, the other way around too, when we look about sins of omission. So let's say I'm driving down the street here on Natural Bridge, and I see somebody pulled over with smoke coming out of their car and their flashers on. What should I do in that scenario, if anything? Maybe, right? I mean, the assumption today is like most people probably have their own phones. But yeah, I can always call the police for them and say, maybe provide them help. Now, again, prudence dictates here, right? Because is it possible that they're doing that on purpose to try to attack somebody or rob them? Sure. But the question is, what should I do in the circumstance I find myself? Probably should do something. What's that, Ashley?
Back in the, you would,
Pull over?
they wouldn't maybe have a car phone, but
Right.
Well, I think it's-
nowadays,
Yeah, everyone has a phone.
everybody has a
Sure.
phone and.
I think the thing too, use your gut.
Yeah.
Instinct. I mean, like they always say like that, we were talking about today, which is like that gut instinct that you feel and you know something's right or wrong or I should do this thing or whatever. It's a thing of like, or this is a bad situation,
Yeah.
or I feel uneasy here or whatever.
Yeah.
So those things, it's insane. Like a lot of the times that I've done it, like watching how a brain reacts. There's a section of the brain that we don't use on any other basis, and that section of that brain when you're using, when you have that, lights up every time in testing. You're like, oh,
Yeah.
this portion of the brain is this.
I may posit one thing that we can always do is pray for them.
Yeah.
Right? Prayer is always effective. Prayer is always good. And so even if you can't do something, physically, we can always pray for their well-being. So maybe that's the best and only thing we can do. That's fine.
So on my way here, I come the Highway 7, and here's a man pushing a wheelchair full of his belongings on the shoulder of the highway. Now, I couldn't pull over, I was in the middle lane, but I called
You
a
did.
friend and said, this guy's, I'm afraid he's gonna get hit, can you call? This is
Yep.
where he is.
Yep. Good.
I've never seen anyone pushing a wheelchair full of belongings on Highway 7, on the shoulder.
That's,
So something else we want to be considerate of is our own example. And we call this scandal, right? Do I lead others maybe into sin by what I do or my words or my actions, right? Am I leading them into perdition by what I do? And a lot of this depends on our state of life. Like as parents, we have a high responsibility to our children to be good examples to them. As priests, I have a really high example to be a good, example to people, right? So we want to be kind of aware of those things and our actions, how they affect others too. Cruelty to animals. Now, this raises a question: is hunting okay?
yes.
It depends
Okay.
why you're hunting.
Why are we hunting, right?
Are you hunting just for sport, or are you gonna eat what you kill?
Yeah.
Kill-
Are you going to use what you kill?
Well, the rule is you kill what you eat.
There are
Well, the
people
other
that
thing
do
Right.
it for
is
sport.
when you're
Right.
hunting, be respectful to life.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So yeah, in general, yeah, hunting's okay, provided we're using that to its proper end.
There's an overpopulation of deer.
Yeah.
So we need to.
Sure.
cut that
But
down.
also, we probably could use that. I mean, we shouldn't just leave the carcass out in the sun to die and, dry up or whatever. It's probably also good to use that for maybe feeding others or, other things.
John the Butcher has a sign, if you don't want the rest of what you
Mhm.
killed, that they will take it and process it and donate it.
I mean, there's things like coyotes where like you have to deal with them.
Yeah.
In the countryside, I mean, you don't necessarily like use a
Sure.
coyote, right?
I think and that goes back to the defense side, right? So in other words, I'm defending, other things. So sure.
I'm protecting my life.
Right.
So, but I think it's more to the respecting animals.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah, you're not gonna like torture it.
Yeah.
Right.
You're
They have
like,
traps.
Even like when I fish, which is silly, like I'm not much of a hunter, but I'm an avid fisherman, and like I'll dispatch a fish instantly. I know plenty of people that'll throw a fish that's gasping for air in a cooler and call it post cooler, call it a day. It takes 2 seconds with a knife to dispatch a fish instantly, and just be a little more gracious.
Yeah. Right. Gossip. Yeah, don't kick dogs. Gossip. So there's kind of 3 aspects when it comes to gossip. Truthfulness, charity, and company. So in other words, let's say I have a good friend at work. They're just having a bad day. Maybe they're taking it out on me. I go home to my spouse and I tell them, man, Jerry was just being a real jerk today. Now that might be truthful. You might tell Jerry that to his face, but your husband or your wife may not know Jerry, in which case there's not an assassination of character involved with that. That'd be different than if I'm in the break room telling my coworkers about Jerry, because that relationship they have with Jerry, that can assassinate his character. In the former aspect, it might be things like, I need to get this off my chest. It's irking me. And it's helpful to me to get it out and talk to someone else about it. That's perfectly fine. We have to be aware of those aspects, though. Do I know what I'm saying to be true? Is what I'm saying something I would say to the person I'm talking about? Am I the right company to be saying these things? There's also a difference between being the source of the gossip and the facilitator, or maybe just the listener of it. Regardless, we try to avoid both. And in charity, if we do start hearing gossip, maybe we should actually take the tact of trying to change the topic, right? But those things need to be considered as well.
In the grade school where I volunteered, they had a big sign. Is it kind? Is it truthful? Is it necessary?
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody know Ann